All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for making the time for us here today. Really, this is designed to be more of a kind of an informal question and answer session. We figured we'd make a number of folks available to you, including City Attorney Pete Schulte, Police Chief Todd Chamberlain, and our Director of Housing and Community Services, Jessica Prosser. But I'll let Pete start and kind of explain what happened today and what comes next, and then we'll take your questions.
Cool. Good afternoon, everybody. Pete Schulte, S-C-H-U-L-T-E, City Attorney for the City of Aurora. So you guys just saw the court hearing. Today was more focused on the underlying criminal nuisance case that the city filed back at the end of last year. Many of you were there on the hearing on December 5th, where we asked to have a status hearing today. We wanted to have the defendants, Five Dallas Partners, have an opportunity to file an answer in this case, which they did on December 30th, and as we alluded to in the hearing today, that came out as what we call a general denial, which means the defendants are going to require the city as the plaintiff to prove each and every one of our complaints that we filed in the petition before this property can be closed in the regular course of a civil case. You also have heard about the emergency petition that my office filed on Thursday of last week, predominantly because of the incident that took place, the very violent incident that took place on December 17th at the end of last year. We waited until after the holidays, obviously because of Christmas and New Year's, before we went ahead and filed that emergency motion that was requested by Police Chief Todd Chamberlain and our city manager, because we really need to get, the police department felt like they really needed to get in control and get a hold of that property because it is being completely unmanaged, right? There is nobody that is at that premise that is going to prevent individuals from committing crimes and doing what they're going to want to do, which is what we call an imminent threat to public safety and welfare. What happened today was that the court, as you heard, has now put us under the regular state rules of civil procedure, which are specific timelines for discovery, for setting the trial date, for those sort of things. So what happened today had nothing to do with the emergency closure order, had everything to do with the setting of proceeding with the criminal nuisance action. So in 42 days, we'll have, for lack of a better term, it's a case management order, but it's a scheduling order. We're going to talk about when discovery is going to end. We're also going to talk about when the trial date could be set. And then you also heard that they are asking for a jury trial. Now, historically, you heard my comments about that I believe that they continue to stall. Jury trials just inherently take longer to get done. And so by asking for a jury trial, which is their right if they pay the jury fee, that is the concern that, again, this is an effort to stall these proceedings. So that's kind of where we are. I'll take some questions now before I have Chief come up. But yeah, you guys just watched that hearing. So,
do you have a sense of like when the closure will take place?
So let me be clear. When I talked to you all on December 6th after our first hearing, I want to be clear that the timeline is still looking like an absolute closure of the property under the emergency order in the middle of February. All right, we wanted to get out. The city purposely got out in front of the media and let the nonprofits know back in the beginning of December that this was coming, right? So, and I've heard some individuals talk that we're not giving enough time. By the middle of February, that's going to be 2.5 months that there's been notice that this was coming. And so that's where we're looking at the timeline. And Ms. Prosser can answer more questions about that. What else?
There's also a 28-day time frame that was mentioned in the hearing. Can you explain that?
The 28-day timeline, that is about, that's part of the rules of procedure. So we have certain deadlines that we have to meet, and we have to provide discovery, what they're called initial disclosures, right? So there's a list of questions under the rules of civil procedure that we have to answer that talk about, who are the defendants, who are the plaintiffs, what is your general cause of action. It's those sort of things. So they have to be filed within 28 days of today. And both sides have to do it. So there'll be more filings in this case as we get closer to that 28-day mark. Yes, ma'am.
It's my understanding there was already a tentative closure plan in place. Why did the city go ahead and file for the emergency closure when there was already the plan moving forward to close the property?
So again, we were waiting on the court process because this was different than 1568 Nome. My office had done the evaluation from a legal perspective, and we felt that the best course of action was to go through the court and have a court order the shutdown because it's being a criminal nuisance. And so because of the horrible criminal event that took place on December 17th, that's when we looked at the code. We already had the criminal nuisance case pending. That's why we filed the emergency petition, which, as you know, the judge granted on Friday. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain the reason for a stall if the closure is still going to head? What's the point of delaying other things?
So Under the emergency closure in our city code, it's supposed to be temporary. So what the court was asking, we're talking about at the end of the hearing today, was the $5 partners could file to repetition the court to reopen the building, right? They had not done that as of today, so the closure order is still in place. And so they could do that, and if they do file a motion for reconsideration, the court will set a hearing. We'll have an evidentiary hearing to present evidence of why we think that the property should still be closed. And at that point, the judge will make the determination if it stays closed. Obviously, the city's position is we've asked for it to be closed, it's getting closed, and now we're going to move into the process that Ms. Prosser will talk about to give everybody the time that we can under the law. Yes, sir.
Along those lines, just in layman's terms, can you describe what people should expect to see in the next days, hours, weeks?
Sure. This week, I will tell you that this week, city management is putting together a final plan. I know that we've talked about bringing in a company to act. It's not going to be called a receiver, but they're going to act like a receiver that we have at Whispering Pines and one of the buildings that are at Edge of Lowry. They'll come in, and these companies have a lot of experience, what we call distressed properties. They're going to come in, and there's going to be an evaluation process, right? There are individuals, I don't know how many, probably not that many that are there that have been there for a long period of time that can show that they're lawful tenants. There are probably many others that have just moved into vacant apartments, don't have any evidence that they've applied for a lease, applied for any type of application with the company. So that's going to be the evaluation, but we are going to have somebody, the city is going to bring somebody in that we're going to pay to go through those individuals and figure out who's lawfully supposed to be there and who is just kind of hitching a ride. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak to the challenges that you've had with the other council in terms of what it sounds like switching up council, who's the attorney of record? It sounds like there was just a lot of miscommunication during today's hearing. Can you just kind of break all that down?
Yeah, what I'll tell you is this is nothing new with dealing with these groups of attorneys. And again, I don't know if it's just miscommunication among them. They have like 6 or 9 attorneys across all of the cases that are pending. We also have the code cases, as you all know, have been on hold from 1568 Nome that are coming up for a status update on February 14th. They have a whole set. Bud Slackett is the lawyer for that case, but then Mr. Garnett came in on that case. They also had lawyers from some big law firms in Denver that were involved at one point. So this has been part of the problem is when we get an answer that we talked about today, which an answer is a response or a reply to the lawsuit, where they go through all the allegations and they're supposed to admit, deny them, or say we don't have enough information. And so in this particular case, they said they didn't admit them because they were just territorial, right? Are we the owners of $5 partners? Yes, right? They admit that, but anything else that was talking about the underlying criminal nuisance, we don't have enough information, so therefore we deny, right? So that tells the court that this is going to be a contested trial. And you saw what happened today when we tried to figure out who was actually representing $5 partners. Yes, ma'am.
Are you thinking of using the same property management company that you used for the receivership used?
It will not be the same group that is handling the receivership for 1568 Nome. Well, actually, 1568 Nome is not under receivership; it's closed. But Whispering Pines in the one building at Edge of Lowry, it will be a different receivership company, but somebody with similar experience. We've been in contact with them for several weeks now.
So it wouldn't be the PMI Aspire company either?
I don't recall the name. We'll let you all know once that we haven't engaged them in a contract yet, so we're still trying to make sure that before we put any names out that we have that done.
And then Aurora Code Enforcement is also trying to bring in the Baumgartens, or just Zev, for some code violations, I believe at 12-18 Dallas. Can you give an update on that? I know Patrick Costin's office has been on that.
Yeah, so of course that's the criminal division of my office. I'll let Ms. Prosser talk a little bit about that when she comes up here. I will tell you that the code cases are ongoing. They will continue. Code compliance officers will still be out. They'll still be out reviewing these properties and filing any continued code violations that we find.
Is there any possibility these properties would be empty in a week before inauguration day?
Not likely. All right. Yes, sir.
Just one more time on the estimated timeline for that group, that company to come in and start checking the residents.
So we hope to have a group, the receiver group, the company that we're going to hire to act like the receiver on the ground within a week or so. All right. And they're going to get in. They have a process that they go through on every property that they deal with. They're going to go in and do kind of a census, right? Who's there, who's a lawful tenant, who's not, who's a squatter, those sort of things. And then they're going to set up a plan. So again, the full closure, all right, I'm not talking about it. There's squatters that aren't supposed to be there that are just trespassing. They're likely going to be removed before a lawful tenant, right? That's just how it works. If you're not a lawful tenant, you don't get any benefit for going to an apartment and breaking in and staying there. In this particular case, if there is lawful tenants, then we'll work with them to figure out. We've been in contact, and Ms. Prosser will talk about this as well. You know, the nonprofits in the area have been begging us to work with Arapahoe County. Guess what? We've done that, and Ms. Prosser will talk about the services that Arapahoe County is going to provide. We are doing this differently than 1568 Nome, because 1568 Nome was a much different situation because of the issues that complex was facing. This one was focused on a criminal nuisance, and that's what Chief Chamberlain will talk more about.
So in the interim, what's to prevent another violent incident from taking place in this property?
Well, that's a good question, but I mean, that's why we have the police department here. They're focused on that apartment complex, but I'll let Chief Chamberlain talk about that. Anything else from me? And I'll be around if you have questions that either one of them can't answer, then I'll pop back up. But all right, Chief.
Thank you, Pete. Sir. Good afternoon, everybody. Todd Chamberlain, Chief of Police, City of Aurora, TODD, CHAMBERLAIN. I really want to thank you for coming here because, again, I think the success or failure of this is based upon a group of people and not one particular entity or group. And when I think about what this means, this is truly an involved stakeholders process where the City of Aurora has seen a major problem that's been affecting our community, hurting our people that live here, and we came together and said we're not going to tolerate it. To be very honest with you, this is truly the foundation of community-based policing or community-oriented policing. We pulled in our stakeholders, we found out what the problems were, we've identified the problems, we focused on those problems, and again, one of those entities that we want to do to focus and to specifically address what the problems were in and around this area was a place-based approach. And again, the place is the problem on this area. There is definitely issues related to the people that live there, but not everybody who lives in these apartment complexes are the problem. The problem is a mismanaged location that basically allowed this type of criminal behavior to take root and start to flourish. We, as a law enforcement organization, without question, have been doing our due diligence. We have effectively, proactively, and aggressively gone into that location and worked on the crime issues in and around there. But to be quite frank with you, it's not enough. Again, we could go in there every day, which we have gone in. I got numbers that support that. We could do calls for service every day. But the bottom line of what the problem is the mismanagement of this location that basically has allowed this problem, this crime, this activity to flourish. And so by doing this criminal nuisance closure, that's really what we wanted to focus on. It was a three-pronged approach for us. We wanted to focus on the criminal activity itself. Again, what has been impacting that area, who has been impacting that area. That we have done with hotspot policing. We have focused on the actual individuals. We have made sure not to over-police. Everybody who in that location, again, is not somebody involved in criminal activity. They are somebody that are just trying to survive, trying to live their life, do the best they can. So again, that has been our strategic plan all the time to make sure we focus on those individuals. The other thing we wanted to focus on was the impact. Again, I think that when I was on this podium, and I think the mere fact that we have convened so many press conferences about this location speaks volumes about why we took the steps we have taken. When you look at the impact on the residents, the impact has been absolutely traumatic. When you think of those two individuals that were held hostage, when you think of the torturing that occurred, when you think of the misuse that happened to them, again, that is one example that we know about. But again, this being an immigrant community, we're not sure if everybody's stepping forward. We're not sure if everybody has that opportunity. We're not sure what other elements of crime are taking place in there, but that is something we are specifically and strategically focusing on. So again, the impact to the residents was incredibly important to us, as well as the impact to the residents in the community in and around that area. That's also something that has to be taken into place. Again, if you live across the street, if you live across the block, if you live in a mile radius, you know what's occurring in and around that location. The impact that can have, the psychological impact, the mental impact, how that just translates a neighborhood that could be prosperous, that could be going in the right direction, and basically holds that in a stranglehold of criminal activity is not going to be tolerated. It's not going to be tolerated on Dallas, and it's not going to be tolerated anywhere else in Aurora. So that was one of the big things. And then lastly, it's about the property management, is holding them accountable. Last week, or December the 17th, when I was here, I showed slides of the location. I showed pictures where guns were hidden in walls. I showed vacant apartments that had not been cared for. I showed the misuse of personnel and people who lived in and around that location, the squalor that they had to live for. All of those things are an exact example of looking at a place saying this place is not going to get any better. This place is basically a cancer to the community. And we as a group of stakeholders, as community members, as law enforcement, as the city family, decided this is not going to be tolerated in Aurora. And so again, that's why we are there. That's why these steps are being taken. We hope with the closure of this venue and the opportunity to get people in different places throughout the city or throughout the metropolitan area, it will give them a new leaf on life. It will give them a new opportunity to explore the things that they hopefully came here to do, and not to be victimized, not to be mistreated. So that's really what this is about, and that's why we have spent so much time, so much effort communicating this, focusing on this, to make sure that everyone is aware that the activities that occurred there are never going to be tolerated. It might be a long process. It might take time. Unfortunately, there's people that got hurt in this process, but the end game of this is it's not going to be tolerated. The community, our victims, our residents, we want to ensure that we are going to use every stance that we can possibly use. We are going to use every tool that we can possibly use to make sure that the city of Aurora is safe and to make sure the people who live here, whether documented or undocumented, are safe and in a safe environment and have the outreach and the connection with the same type of services anybody in the city of Aurora would get, no matter where they live or where they reside. So with that, I'd like to answer any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Chief, in your affidavit supporting this move, you said that a criminal element has exerted fear and control over others at the complex. So can you explain whether you think a gang, whether it's TDA or another gang, has taken control of that complex?
I will, yeah, and I do believe it's TDA. Again, the individuals that were detained on the 16 that were detained on that day, and I have the exact numbers for you. The 16 that we detained on that day, out of those 16, we have 7 of them that have been specifically identified as TDA gang members through our relationship with HSI at DHS. And again, when you look at the classification or how we would identify other gang members is if they are doing criminal activity in the advancement of a gang. So when you think of 7 TDA members involved in this activity, it's not a far stretch for me to say that all 15 were somehow affiliated with this gang or this activity. So yes, I think that's been a present in and around there for a long time. I think that without question, they exerted their control. I think that the extortion that went on with our victims from the 17th, we made a big push on that day to make sure that we articulated out to everybody that documented, undocumented, if you have been victimized, please come forward, let us know, because if we don't know about it, we can't address it. But again, I think that fear factor is still there. So hopefully, by the closure of this location, these individuals that are just trying to live their life will be able to get away from this element that has controlled this area, that has taken root in this area, again, based upon the mismanagement, based upon the opportunities that they were allowed to do in and around that area.
Chief, speaking to that fear factor, you said that there are 3 additional suspects who have warrants who have not been in custody at this point. Are they connected specifically to the kidnapping incident? And should the people in that complex and in that area, should they be fearful or worried about those 3 outstanding suspects?
I think they should always be fearful. I think they should always understand that that possibility is there. I think that why we are doing this closure is exactly that. Again, when we got involved on the incident on the 17th, where those individuals were held hostage, when we did our response back there and we took out those 19 individuals from locations, we found out that some of those individuals were actually involved in the first videotape from all the way back in August. And so again, they were living there, and I'm sure that they were in there still causing harm, still causing fear, and still causing control. So I wouldn't say fear it. I'd say that, again, to those people that are in that apartment complex, this might be a hard pill to swallow. You might think this is the only home I've known since I've come to the United States. But I want them to know that there is a better place to live than on Dallas Street. There is a better place where they can go to, where the city is going to help facilitate, getting them in a better place. And again, coming to that squalor of that location, coming to the crime of that location, coming to the victimization of that location, this step, again, it's going to be hard. It's going to be complex for them, but they're not doing it alone. They are doing it with the support of the entire city of Aurora. They are doing it with the guidance and support of our housing, with our city attorney, with law enforcement completely behind them, and we are here to support them. So I wouldn't say be fearful, but I would definitely say be weary.
Is there anything more you could tell us about those 3 outstanding suspects?
Other than the fact that they are outstanding, again, we don't know if they have fled. Again, we did have individuals that were picked up in New York City prior to that, so whether they're on that same trajectory or that same path, I don't know. But it is something that we are still looking at. We are putting all of our law enforcement assets and resources to try to locate those 3 individuals. We have communicated with the law enforcement community across the nation, and if and when they are detained or picked up anywhere else, we will make sure that we get that information and make sure we pass it along to you.
Do you believe they're also tied to TDA?
I would say based on what I have seen, I would say based upon the affiliation of the individuals that were detained with them, the fact that they were involved in this endeavor of extortion, of kidnapping, of basically causing crime, I would definitely say that most likely they are involved in it, yes.
I think you mentioned that the department isn't trying to over-police, but also you have a presence there every day. Can you bridge that gap and really tell us what patrolling looks like on a day-to-day basis?
I will. And again, I think that's really important, and I appreciate that, because for me it really was a fine line. When I first got here in August, the first thing I was asked is, hey, what are you going to do? Well, you've got to be very concise in how you respond. Because what you can't do is what you just mentioned. You can't go into an area and over patrol, and everybody who's living there, everybody who's trying to live a life gets stopped, gets frisked, gets their cars impounded, gets taken into custody. And that's really hard because, again, when we talk about these individuals causing the crime, when we talk about these individuals affiliated or in TDA gangs, they don't wear uniforms. They don't have insignias or nameplates that say they're involved with this activity. So we have to be very concise in how we do that. But it's a process that never stops. Again, we look for the individuals that are causing the crime and we hold them accountable. And I think that you can see that in the patrol response. And I'm going to give you a couple of numbers. Again, we have spent a huge amount of time, and this is just since December 17th, the event on December 17th. I have the numbers for the year, which I'll give you as well. But we have been doing high visibility. We've been doing continuous building walkthroughs. We have done traffic stops. We have done talk and knock investigations where we have gone to every single apartment within those locations, verified if they have had any issues similar to what has been taking place or what took place on December 17th or anything similar to what took place before. We've had community policing and quality of life issues in and around their address. We have done garbage disposals. We have done pickup. We have made sure that we have passed out leaflets that to our undocumented population in there, they have clear understanding, both in English and in Spanish, that law enforcement is there to support them. The numbers related to that activity, we have contacted over 21 subjects. We've made 7 arrests. We have had 5 wanted persons taken into custody. We've done 10 summons, and we've towed 4 vehicles. Year to date, I want to give you some information on that. 2024, where we were at, we had total calls for service were at 382. We had officer-initiated calls, which were 83. And then we had offenses reported 77, and we had a total of 25 arrests. That compares to 2023, where we had calls for service at 203. We had only 12 initiated calls. Again, that's the big difference. I hope that kind of came clear, because in 24, once we became aware of the activity, we immediately started to focus on that location. And again, it wasn't about over-policing. It wasn't about coming in with armor. It wasn't about coming in with SWAT teams. It was about coming in with the resources that were necessary to bring calm to that area and to work that area. And that's where you saw the increase in initiated officer calls for service. So that's the activity that we do. That's the focus that we do. This closure is an exact example of place-based policing, where we've identified the individuals, we have done hotspot policing, and now we've identified that the place is so ill-managed, is so problematic, that it has to be addressed. And that address is going to come through, again, litigation issues through a city attorney, and then it's also going to come through the closure and hopefully a rebirth for the people that live there, and a rebirth for the venue itself as it gets fixed and as it gets put in a much better place than where it's at now.
Chief, I just want to be clear on something I asked you before. Your predecessor downplayed the role that TDA might be playing in what was happening there. Do you think the gang has taken over when you're talking about extortion and things? Is that the right way to put it? How would you put it? What is the situation there?
Again, I wouldn't say a takeover, but I would definitely say that they had a huge influence in that community. I would say that they brought fear to that community. I would say that they definitely have brought victimization. I think a takeover would be where people wouldn't even be able to live or go in and around that place. I think that there was still life that was occurring in those apartment complexes, but I don't think it was a quality of life that anybody in this room would want. I think, again, when I talk of the extortion, when I talk of the crime and the victimization, Again, it's a fine line between takeover. I mentioned this before in some other press conferences. You could go to any major city and there's going to be problematic areas. There's going to be areas where extortion or taxing by gang members is going to be in place. That's not unique, unfortunately. That's the reality. And again, you can either just keep on kicking the can down the road, or we can say, hey, we are going to take a step forward and do something that's incredibly proactive by closing this venue, recalibrating it, and then hopefully having it open it up in a new way. So again, for me, that's it. I think without question, TDA is part of this problem. They are a big part of the problem. I also think, again, and I go back to my initial conversation, I think the way that these individuals were brought into the city of Aurora, the way they were dropped off here, I think that's incredibly problematic. I think the misplanning at a federal level was absolutely destructive to the individuals that reside there. I think it was destructive to the community in and around that area, and I think it was destructive to the city of Aurora as a whole. I think now we are in the business of catch-up. I think we are trying to rectify an incredibly bad situation which was allowed to happen. And hopefully by this catch-up and by these new processes and these new things that we're implementing, the victimization will stop. And the people that came here for a better life will have that opportunity to have that and not be fearful every time they go outside of their house, or not wait for that door knock where somebody's going to ask them for $500 worth of rent money, which is really nothing other than saying extortion money. So that's why I'm so passionate about this. That's why we're all so passionate about this, is because what's been going on there, it should never be allowed to fester. It should never be allowed to continue. And we are in a position where we can stop that. And like I said, it's not going to be an easy lift. It's not going to be something that happens overnight, but the fact that the process is starting, the fact that we are taking steps that go far beyond just having patrol cars drive back and forth, I think it speaks volumes about how passionate this city is and this department is about making sure everyone is served.
But did the city not realize this before? I mean, when the viral video came out, we were told it's not a big deal, you know, it's not a takeover, it doesn't look, you know, it's over-exaggerated.
Yeah.
What happened?
And again, I can't talk to that. I can talk about what I've seen since I've gotten here. And what I have seen is, again, you have a problematic location, and we have taken incredible steps to address that. And that's what I can talk to. And we will continue to take incredible steps to make sure that those people are safe.
Does the department have a plan for when the building is closed, if that is mid-February? Like, how are officers going to be stationed at that property for that day?
Yeah, and that's going to be more in line with, just again, with the city attorney as well to talk about that, but there is going to be systems that are in place as well as boarding up the venue, security guards that will be there, lighting and things like that will change.
Through all of this, there's going to be a major, I'm assuming, major variable with federal law enforcement. How are you meshing with them now? How will you mesh with them when that changes, if
Yeah.
it does? Is anything going to happen at all differently?
Right now, nothing is going to happen. Again, if they are here undocumented, municipal law enforcement, the Aurora Police Department, if they are not breaking laws, we are here to support them and serve them. If somebody is breaking laws, it's like I said before, again, with these 16 that were detained that were involved in the torture and the kidnapping and the extortion, I will not hesitate 1 second to use Department of Homeland Security, to use ICE, to use HSI, to use anybody I can that will hold those individuals that victimize somebody else accountable. So again, that is not going to be a changed posture for us. If they are not breaking crimes, if they are not committing crimes, and if they do not come in contact with the Aurora law enforcement, then probably none of those entities are going to be involved with them. But if they are, from a municipal level, from what I can control, I will make sure that I use any tool available to hold those people accountable that are hurting somebody else.
Chief, can I clarify that all 16 people that were detained were involved with torture? Because originally it sounded like it was like 8 and 8 were in ICE, but...
Yeah, there was actually 19 detained that day. We found out that 3 of them had absolutely nothing to do with it. And so that's something it's a good opportunity to clarify as well. People looked at that as, hey, it was a raid on Dallas Street. That's what I keep hearing. That was not a raid on Dallas Street. That was a response to a 911 call for service where 2 people were brutally victimized, brutally mistreated, and tortured. So it wasn't a raid. It was generated by a call for service based upon criminal activity. And again, I would just like to applaud and say thank you for the courage of those individuals who did that, because that began the function of realizing the extent of what's occurring in and around there. And I hope for all of the individuals involved, it was the catalyst for saying, hey, this goes beyond traditional policing. We have to try new and innovative things to stop that victimization in there. So as far as the 16 specifically, yes, they were specifically involved. They were identified by our victims. The apartments that were addressed were specifically identified by our victims as being involved, and those are the individuals that we focused on that day.
We've only gotten 9 of those people released, their identities and like what they were charged for. What about the other ones? Will we ever hear a release after those?
You will. As more information, there's still an ongoing investigation. We're still establishing probable cause to keep all of them engaged in this, to make sure that we're vetting that and going through that process. So again, this is still an investigation that's unfolded. Again, it seems like it was a long time ago, but it's been less than a month that unfortunately those victims had to go through that. And so we are doing our due diligence to make sure that we get the right individuals and we hold them accountable.
Chief, is there a concern at all that by closing this property that it's just going to push this gang somewhere else?
And again, that is something that we really look at, because the displacement of crime is something that we don't want to do. I don't want to play whack-a-mole with TDA gang members and crime and violent activity. I don't want them to go from one location to another. And so what we're really focusing on is analyzing and looking at our data and seeing where we see some of the same patterns or same behavior starting to develop, so we can focus on those areas. And a big part of it too, and again, it'll be spoken about here in a second when housing steps up, is when these people get placed in new locations or new venues, is making sure that we aren't repeating history where we're just moving them from one place to another place, but making sure that they're dispersed in different areas throughout the city of Aurora and throughout the entire metropolitan area, to be quite frank with you. A lot of these individuals, again, they came here based on, one, there was absolutely no control at the border whatsoever. And then once they got into Denver, again, Denver then transferred a lot of them into the city of Aurora. And it's like I said, we had a speculation that there was somewhere between the area of 40,000 or so that came into the city of Aurora. That's kind of the guesstimation that it was. And I want to really stress to you what that's like, because the city of Aurora is a major city, and you basically took another city, a small city, and placed it into a major city with all the complexities, with all the issues that are occurring. So again, I think there's a lot of things that we can do better this time. I think there's a lot of opportunities to rethink how the process was done, because I think what felt good for the heart, hey, we're going to have people and they're going to come to this country and it's going to be great. I hope now that we have the opportunity to step back, rethink of how we can methodically get people in the right places at the right time to where they aren't going to be victimized in any way whatsoever.
Chief, are you saying the city of Denver itself moved people who immigrated in this country into the city of Aurora?
Yes, I am. Next question.
Do you have any message for leadership of the city of Denver?
I really don't. I hope that as we move forward, again, this is not about pointing fingers to anybody. This is about the reality of what we had occur here in the city of Aurora. And what we had is we had a crime-infested location where people got hurt. And so I guess the message to anybody, whether it's the city of Denver or the city of any city anywhere, is think about what you do. Think about where you place immigrants. Think about the influx of those immigrants and what they need and what they don't need, and the infrastructure that's lacking that they need to survive, that they need to live in this community or any community. Because if you do something that just feels good by the heart, hey, we're going to have people, we're going to throw them into an apartment somewhere, and it's not established with infrastructure, it's not established with a process, it's not a clear path for somebody to understand how to survive, I don't think you're setting them up for success, and you're not setting the city up for success. You're setting it up for failure. You're setting it up for heartache. You're setting it up for victimization. You're setting it up for people to be mistreated and abused and used. And so again, whether it's the city of Denver or any city, I really think meticulously you have to look at how we work with the new community and how we work with the individuals that come to this country. Any questions?
We got housing.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jessica Prosser, Director of Housing and Community Services for the City of Aurora. I want to start by saying that all of the habitability concerns, which obviously started on these properties in 2023, are ongoing. That is a separate process from everything we've spoke about today. They're still in court proceedings there. The next hearing is on February 14th. We still have trash abatement orders on the property. We're abating trash every other week. There's still outstanding $70,000 or more in water, utilities, gas, and all of that. So the property still stands stands to be pretty uninhabitable from a code enforcement perspective as well, but again, a separate process from this. I wanted to go back to the receivership piece and the group that will act as the receiver in this case. We'll be meeting with them, and again, as Pete said, establishing agreements with them. But really, I think our fundamental expectation will be that that group's going door to door. Right now, we still have about 52 units available. There's 60 in the 5 remaining buildings, with about 8 boarded up at this point. They'll be going door to door to understand who's living there, what their situation is. They will be getting that information back to the city. We will be sharing that with the county. As we said, we're developing some partnerships with Arapahoe County to help these folks with housing navigation. From there, the groups that the county is going to be working with will work with these folks individually on housing navigation. The receiver may also work with folks on relocation assistance. Again, that is still preliminary, no details there. But for Arapahoe County, they will be working again on housing navigation individually with folks to figure out where best to move them next. And we will not be doing kind of a one-size-fits-all for everyone. We know that people are in very different situations. And then, as Pete and Chief Chamberlain have also said, there's probably folks that are just squatting there as well and may need to be removed more immediately by the receiver. And working with the folks that have been residing there for longer, that receiver will then collect that information, and we'll work together with on housing navigation. Again, that's what's been asked by many of the advocacy groups, so following through on that. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions?
Is any financial aid going to be given to these residents as they seek a new place to live?
Yeah, so again, is the county is sort of working with other partner agencies to look at housing navigation. They will be evaluating whether financial assistance can be provided depending on that individual family. They're really focused on families with their assistance. So things like, do they have a job? Are they self-sufficient? Will they be able to get another unit? And things like that will be established. And then that level of financial assistance would be determined by the housing navigator at that time. Obviously, there's lots of resources when it comes to housing. I oversee housing and homelessness. There's a myriad of different things we work with folks when they're housing insecure or they're at vulnerability of becoming homeless.
Did you say how many people might lose access to their housing unit if the closures happened in February?
At this point, we do not have an accurate number of people residing at the property. I did say there's 52 units that are still available there. We do not know how many people are in each of those. From our previous experience with the other CBZ properties, there has been, anywhere from 2 to 12 people per unit. So it's really important that that company that's acting as the receiver, again, create that inventory of who's residing there as one of the first steps.
When it comes to the county helping people maybe with financial assistance, does it matter if they're here legally in the country or not to get that financial assistance?
So more specifics will be coming on that. The county is using some pretty specific resource dollars that they may or may not qualify for. So I'm not going to answer that on behalf of the county yet. That will be worked out through some of the details. And again, even if it's not county money, that housing navigator may identify another resource that could help that family beyond county funds.
Government money? Besides government money, you mean?
Very possibly, yes.